if someone ran up to Jesus and said, I really want to view porn right now, knowing what you know about Jesus, how would he respond?
So are you suggesting that most people have unhealed trauma from their childhood?
We're not talking about trauma just to like give you an out, right? To just say, oh, I'm traumatized, it's just the way I am.
Mm-hmm.
No. The better you understand yourself, man, the better you can start rewriting your story. And it's really empowering. It's really liberating.
And there's hope, right?
Oh, totally.
We're going to get to this. Okay, Michael Anderson, thank you for coming to my house today to record.
Dude, this is awesome. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my honor. So I'm going to tell you about my introduction to you. I have the app, the Here Brotherhood, and I've had two of the founders on. And at one point they had a guest speaker, you.
Yeah.
And you were talking about really important things. Unfortunately, I was actually finishing a project for a client. So I was listening to you and then editing, mixing this track. And so I didn't get very much.
Yeah.
But what I heard, I was fascinated by.
Cool.
So you're a psychologist.
Therapist.
Yeah.
Therapist.
Tell me about your schooling real quick and what got you into that.
Yeah. So, master's degree in marriage and family therapy.
Okay.
And what got me into is I was actually have my wife to thank for that. She was a family studies major for her undergrad. And so I'd be working completely, like being a therapist, all that stuff was completely off the radar, but I'd come home and she'd tell me all the cool stuff she was learning about family therapy, marriage, relationships, mental health, and just started falling in love with it. Just kind of thought it'd be super cool just to explore that more. I actually didn't know what a therapist did, but I was like, this sounds amazing. So I gave it a shot.
I don't think many people did until like a couple of years ago. I feel like therapy is just, now it's just so common, but before COVID, like it wasn't like well accepted, I guess, or understood.
Yeah.
I mean, at least that was my experience and those around me.
No, I think you're right. I think there's definitely been a stigma. I think there's still a bit of a stigma to it, but a lot has changed in the last 5 to 10 years for sure. For the better, I think. Absolutely.
Yeah. Has there been any, so generally for the better, is there any like negatives that you see of having therapy it's so high on a pedestal right now?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like total pendulum swing, like therapy is the answer to everything.
Yeah.
Is there any caution that you would say, like holding it that high?
Yeah, totally. So it's human nature to like swing from one extreme to the other extreme, right? And so the dangers of this extreme of putting therapy on such a high pedestal is realizing that the therapist doesn't do the healing, right? Like if it's got to be you willing to work on yourself.
Dude, that's a great point.
Yeah.
It seems, I've been to therapy a few times, and then the problem that happened, he was so good and I really enjoyed him so much that we're now working on a book together.
Oh,
and he said, before we go any further, I haven't gotten too far into your psyche, so we need to stop. If we're going to be friends and like work together, I have to stop. We have to stop. So we only had like 2 or 3 sessions. And it was just fun. But I really respected that because he had to turn down a client.
Yeah.
Is that ethically like a thing in therapy? Like,
that sounds like that was the right call for him.
Cool.
to not get in that kind of dual relationship with you, right? Yeah. And it can be kind of weird if you're like writing a book with your therapist, you know, you're just like, are you analyzing me while we're editing this? You know, so that's probably that was definitely the right call of your therapist for sure.
That's awesome. Okay, so you learned, your wife came home, you learned these ideas, and then you got fascinated. Were you already in a major and had to change your major, or what happened there?
No, I was done with school. I didn't think I was going to go back. I got my undergrad, and nothing related to therapy. And so I was working, and I kind of thought I was just going to make a career out of what I was doing, and I definitely had a mental block that said you can't go to grad school, like that's too much. School had never really come naturally to me. And that's one reason why I knew I had to do it. I was like, I've got to do it because my mind's like telling me I can't, and so I've got to prove myself that I can do this. And
that's a cool lesson.
Yeah.
Why did you know that you needed to do it when your mind told you not to?
Because I knew that it's what I knew it's like what I want. It's if I was like getting in touch with my values and what was going to create a life of more meaning, more satisfaction, more fulfillment, it was going to be on the other side of grad school. And because it terrified me, and I decided I have to look at that like a sign that I need to do it instead of viewing fear as a reason to not do something, use fear as a reason of, well, I'm scared of this because this is obviously something that really matters to me.
So I totally agree. And this is how I call it resistance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whenever I get inspired or have an idea, I can usually predict how important it's going to be in my life by how much resistance I feel.
Totally. Yeah.
And I feel that has been something I've grown into with like emotional intelligence, just like knowing that. How did you get that's pretty mature, because how old are you when you felt that and understood this?
I had been, let's see, I was probably 27.
That's really young. I don't think I would have understood that principle. So you felt resistance and fear, but how did you know that was going to be, oh, this doesn't feel right? I feel a lot of fear. It must not be the path.
Yeah.
Like that's our default, right?
Yeah.
So how did you get there, and how do we learn from you on that?
Yeah. And honestly, probably a lot of this hindsight's 2020, right? Like
yes,
now
sure.
I'm putting myself back there as a 27-year-old, just like trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. My initial thoughts, I think, are this. I think it was, you have to think about like, what's the outcome that you're going towards, right? Is the outcome values based? Is it something that I just feel like is going to create more fulfillment? And then you look at the path, and if the path has fear on it, but the outcome is something really values driven, then I think you look at that fear and treat it a little more gently, right? And say like, well, of course this scares me, right? Like the stakes are high because I care about it. This is something that matters to me. And so learning how to treat fear not as like your enemy, but instead just like honor it, just like, yeah, thanks fear for pointing me in the direction that I know I need to go.
Dude, that's such a cool perspective. I love that. Treating it and honoring it like a guidepost.
Yeah.
That's better than how I do it. I feel the resistance. I'm like, okay, now I need to trudge into it, but
Yeah.
I'm going to honor it. That's so much better. Okay, so you go back to grad school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I go back to grad school. I don't know what a therapist does.
Yep.
In fact, it was like my first week of school. It was like in between classes, and the cohort was just kind of talking in between. Like we had like a break, whatever. And I leaned over at one person, true story, and I was like, "Hey, just real quick, can you just tell me like what does a therapist do? Like what are we doing?" And she looked at me like with like these like wide eyes, like, "What in the world are you doing here? Like what are you like? Is that a real question?" But I really just didn't know. I just knew like, I know we're supposed to help people live more meaningful lives. That's all I know. And so, yeah, went back to school. I did marriage and family therapy and really fell in love with working with couples, and did a lot of couples therapy. And, that just kind of naturally bled into, learning about trauma healing, just because if there's one area in our life where trauma shows up and affects our fulfillment, it's in our closest relationships. And so then I started learning about trauma healing and getting training in that, and fell in love with it because I just realized more and more that unprocessed trauma affects us in every aspect of our life. And so if you want lasting change, you've got to eventually go there.
Okay. Right. Let's go there. This is the stuff that you're talking about that I was like, oh, this needs to be spread far and wide.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to think of, I usually like to take the perspective of our listeners, like someone who's thinking like, what are some signs? How does unhealed trauma reveal itself in their life? So say someone's in like a marriage that's like at the moment kind of subpar or rocky.
Sure. Yeah.
And they don't know any better. And it's like, what's going on with me? Why do I feel the way I feel?
Yeah.
What's something that you can speak to on this? Is that a good question?
Just like what are some signs maybe that maybe trauma is playing a role in this?
Yes,
is that what you're asking?
Thank you. Yes.
So, we could apply this specifically to marriage, but honestly, this applies to anything. Trauma shows up here's a few ways it does. One is reactivity.
Okay.
If there are just things that happen, pop psychology has really used this word trigger, and it's kind of, but I'm not using it the way like people blow it out of proportion. I'm actually using the way it's supposed to be used, right?
Sure.
Like activating events that trigger big reactive emotions out of us
that seem unreasonable,
okay, right? Like in hindsight, you look back like, why did I respond that way?
Okay.
Either in emotion, in behavior, right?
Yeah.
So reactivity is a big thing. Unhelpful patterns. Like if you're caught in unhelpful patterns, you're like, I have tried everything to break this, and I keep falling right back into old cycles.
Is this like an addiction? Is this pornography? What are you talking about? Like what?
This could be addiction. This could be pornography.
Yeah.
This could be anger. This could be rage, right? This could be shutting down and withdrawing from your partner, right? Whenever things get vulnerable, right? Or rough. Really anything. Behavioral patterns that you keep finding yourself slipping into that you just wish you weren't slipping into.
And there's hope, right?
Oh, totally.
We're going to get to this, but
totally hope. Yes, absolutely.
That's why you're here. Keep going. What are other signs?
A lot of this takes it all takes reflection, but this might take a deeper level of reflection, is like the beliefs that we hold.
Okay.
How we view certain situations, right? If we have these beliefs of I'm not good enough, I can't overcome this. Other people could do this, but not me. I'll just fail. I'm weak. I'm unlovable. I'll never be good enough, right? I'm unsafe in some way. These types of beliefs that I think we all experience.
That's what's hard for me to understand, is like this. All these things you're mentioning seem commonplace for everyone. So are you suggesting that most people have unhealed trauma from their childhood?
Yeah, I'm super glad you asked that, because so here's kind of what I think is super important to understand, right?
Okay.
Is when we talk about trauma, a lot of times our mind wants to go to like the really obvious things that we usually call trauma, right? These like terrible things like abuse, right? War, right? Being attacked, like what these really obvious terrible things happen to people. And that's obviously trauma, but trauma, when we talk about trauma, all we're talking about is memories and experiences that haven't been fully processed yet, right?
Hold on. So memories and experiences that haven't been processed.
Yeah, that our brain hasn't processed yet.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be some severe thing. It could have just been something that we skipped over.
Could have been something that we skipped over. I mean, there's a whole subfield of trauma. I don't know if subfield's the right word for it, but there's a whole thing that we call complex trauma.
Okay. That
just describes the fact that trauma is complex. It can be subtle. It can be things that happened to you. It can be things that didn't happen to you. It can be things that happened in your childhood. Mm-hmm. That's obviously that's a big one, right? A lot of trauma stems from, very formative years of life.
Yeah.
They can be things that happen later in life as well. They're just our brain either at the time didn't have the resources for, or since just hasn't known how to process yet. And so it affects the way we show up today.
Okay, so you're suggesting everyone has trauma.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's why these things appear in our lives, things that we don't want.
Yeah.
Patterns that we don't understand.
Yeah.
Okay, this is awesome. This is new to me, and I'm loving this.
Yeah. And maybe even, I think in the psychology world obviously it's really important to avoid like it's always this and it's always that, right? But I will say with lots of confidence that to experience trauma is way more normal than everyone wants, than a lot of people think, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And it sounds like no matter how good your family was, no matter how wonderful, like that's the thing, is there's a lot of seeming guilt with people that say like, I can't have problems. My parents loved me and I came from a great home, and right. This is a common thing. I came from a great situation.
Yeah, totally.
But I still struggle with some of the things you're talking about. So this is like relieving to hear, I guess.
Totally. And I think it's where some people maybe sometimes have resistance in this idea, right? Because there's this very untrue notion that like if we're traumatized, right, then there's like no hope for us, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we're victims to trauma, right? Like we can't heal, we can't overcome. I actually think it's the opposite. I think it's incredibly empowering, because if there's one thing I believe so firmly, it's that the brain not only can heal, but it wants to heal.
It wants to. Why do you believe that?
Well, I'd love to say like I came up with that idea, right? But like that just comes from listening to other trauma researchers and things like that. But I mean, if you think of how interconnected the body is, you get a cut, right, on your hand.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you have to like will yourself to heal?
No,
No, right? You don't have to like look at the cut and be like, come on, I know we can do
it would be
this. Right?
sweet.
Yeah.
Use the Force or something.
Yeah, use the Force, so like Wolverine, you know,
Yeah.
like, but no, like the body just wants to heal. There's processes for healing,
Okay.
right? If we let those processes happen, why would it be any different in our brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like our brain wants to heal. It wants to process.
Mm-hmm.
It just needs the resources. It needs awareness, and the more we heighten that awareness, the more we give ourselves those resources, our brain can heal.
How does the brain manifest itself wanting to heal? Is it by the reactions, like these negative things that are showing? Is that the brain saying I need attention, or what? Like how do we know that it, like I believe what you're saying.
Yeah.
I totally agree with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
How does it manifest that?
Here's how I've seen it manifest.
Okay, yeah.
So I will work with clients who will sit down in the chair and say, man, I'm so scared to face this. Right? There are parts of me that I feel really scared to face. There's a lot of pain there, a lot of shame, a lot of self-doubt. And I'm scared that if I face that, then these parts are just going to overwhelm me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be destroyed. Right? And time after time, and not just with me, but like you bring any other therapist or psychologist that does trauma work, and you see that once they finally face it with the right resources, right? Mm-hmm. Like with a professional, with someone who can guide them through that process, what happens is all of that fear, right? They realize it starts to get replaced with self-love. It starts to get replaced with self-compassion. It starts to get replaced with curiosity. And like these patients didn't force that to happen. It just starts to naturally happen as you start to face pain, as you start to face trauma. The brain just starts to heal with those types of functions, if that makes sense.
That's amazing. Have you read The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis?
I have not, but I've heard great things about it.
I'm listening to it. It's one of my favorite books. I do it like every year, but I was listening like today. There's a part where there's this, it's basically like a vision of kind of this afterlife, and these spirits come from hell to come visit like this like beautiful place where other spirits can come down and like help them.
Yeah.
And bring them to the mountains, bring them to Jesus, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But they've got to like get rid of their pride and get rid of their problems so they can physically go.
Yeah.
And one of the guys has this lizard attached to his body on the back, and this lizard is lust, and it's always whispering in his ear.
Yeah.
He hated the lizard. He's like, I wish I could get rid of it.
Yeah.
But this angel comes down to like escort him and help him and kind of process in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he says, let me kill the lizard. And the guy's like, no, there's a better day for it. Like, it'll hurt. And this angel has these like powerful hands reaching, almost ready to do. He's like, can I kill it? He just keeps saying, can I kill it? Can I kill it? And the guy has all these excuses, just like you said, these people saying it's going to destroy me to go into this fear, to go into this. And then he finally says, okay, go ahead, do it. And he kills the lizard.
Yeah.
And then what happens is the lizard writhes and screams. And then it turns into this amazing stallion, like the most beautiful horse.
Yeah.
And the man is healed, and he rides off because he's now in control.
Yeah.
And it's like that self-love that you say that the brain or the spirit, I mean, I'm going to say spirit. That's my vernacular.
Please do. Yeah.
Heals and fills the person with healing. So that is so like stark in my mind, that example from that book.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm actually so glad you went there, because I firmly believe that, like, honestly, like the reason why I believe the brain wants to heal is because when we finally have that courage and sit and face it, like, I believe we have divine help to heal, right?
Yeah,
like,
I believe that.
It's our, like, we get in touch with who we really are, we get in touch with our spirit, and the divine heals. And that's why I think it's so powerful.
Isn't it the whole point of Christ?
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
To make whole.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's so beautiful. So I know probably in a clinical setting, I don't know if you're allowed to bring in that type of
I do it more often than you'd think.
Oh, good. Well, that's cool.
I mean, I always check with my clients first, and like, hey, is it okay if I bring in a spiritual aspect here? And I think 100% of the time they said yes, right? And yeah, we absolutely go there. I'm like, just so you know, like, what I believe is happening here, and we talk there, and they feel the same way. They're just like, yeah, like, why wouldn't God want us to heal, right?
Yeah,
like that's part of the plan.
So, can you give some tips on how to be courageous in wanting to heal and having the courage to do it.
Yeah.
I know that there's in men's hearts, there's always a secret war. You know, like we provide, we go out and
Yeah.
slay the beasts,
Yeah.
and we put on the stoic face, and
Yeah.
we want to be good. We desire to be strong.
Yeah.
But there's that war of something from childhood, something from teenage or even marriage, whatever.
Past relationships.
That put us in these unwanted patterns. What do you want to tell those guys? What are we not talking about to get people to want to dive in and be courageous in this healing?
Yeah. I think the most important word in the English language is the word curiosity.
Cool.
I tell my clients, I was like, all right, so where we're going is self-love. But the only thing, like the worst thing to do is try and force self-love, right? Like, okay, I love myself. Okay. Right. Like, so let's not worry about starting there. How about we just start with curiosity, right? Like, you've got these parts of you that you've spent years running away from. And you spent years running away from it because, ironically, you're so dang brave and strong and resilient and courageous, right? Like, you just want to be the best man you can be. And so what if we just open up some curious space here and just get curious about this idea that maybe these parts of you don't want to destroy you. Maybe these parts of you actually want a relationship with you. And maybe you could actually come to better understand these parts of you and like help them heal. Like, you channel all that strength and that resilience that you have towards actually going inward now.
Because all these vices are outward.
Yeah.
We're going outward to get some sort of like feeling or comfort, right?
Sure.
It's a counterfeit because it's all outward, where God works inward on the heart. The kingdom of God is within us. That's where,
Yeah.
Okay. Keep going.
Yeah. And just this idea of like you don't even have to believe yet that what we're saying is true. I'm just wondering, can you start being curious about that? Right. And curiosity is awesome because curiosity gives us permission to suspend judgment, gives us permission to suspend shame, gives us permission to suspend criticism, and just observe, just look, right? Just look at what we don't have to engage with it yet. Just look at what we're scared of.
So what does that look like? Someone observing, like, if they have a tendency to do something, like the feelings that lead up to that, like, what are you curious about?
Yeah, a lot. So this kind of goes into the model of therapy that I use, which is, and I use it in my coaching as well, called internal family systems.
Okay.
Or IFS for short. But it basically believes that we're all made of these different parts of us, right? And getting curious with these parts of us can look like a lot of different things, but I think where you start is actually just like slowing down and asking yourself questions like, okay, why is this part of me doing what it's doing? What is this part scared of happening if I didn't do it? Right? What if this part actually wanted to heal? What could that look like, right? What if I could be ready to try something new? What could that look like? It's just like asking yourself questions about these parts of you that we really don't ever get curious about, ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
We just try and ignore them or disregard them.
Yeah. I'm thinking right now of something that I'm uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
And like sometimes, and it's not all the time, but sometimes when I have an open space of time where I don't have anything to do, like scheduled,
Yeah.
I'm almost scared to hear that, like, to just be silent in my head.
Yeah.
Not that I'm doing anything wrong, but it's like, I'll want to like maybe play a video game for 20 minutes before my next thing, or go read or like scroll. It's like,
Yes.
that is interesting and sometimes I love being alone and but that is a common thing that I've started to notice, that if I have 20 minutes of nothing,
Yeah.
I got to fill it with something that's not being by myself. I don't know. Is that
totally? Yeah. Totally.
It's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable.
It's really uncomfortable.
This might sound like that's really stupid. That's not a real problem, but it is. It's like I look for something. I'm like, I don't want to be alone for 20 minutes.
That it's not stupid at all. That is absolutely a thing that countless people deal with, right? There is not enough in this world. There is not enough peace inside people's souls. And so of course we would want to distract and turn outward as much as possible.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, I know you can't talk about certain clients, but some stories of darkness, marriage saved, like the hope that there is through therapy, through Christ, through healing. Is there any stories that you can share that would enlighten us on this IFS? Is that what it's called?
Yeah. IFS. Yeah, man. The first thing that comes to mind is I was working with a client who had struggled with pornography for like years.
Yeah.
Like I think he's fairly young. He just recently he gotten married and everything, and he's been struggling for years, and like came to me and was saying, I'm experiencing like these urges like daily. Like I'm always at war with myself. Like it's so hard to be present, so hard to feel like connected to other people, right? And this was actually very early on in my journey. So I work a lot with men to help them overcome porn. And he was one of my first clients, and I actually had no idea what I was doing at first.
Oh my gosh.
I was like this like young therapist, and he's like, hey, like I really want to overcome pornography. Can you help me? And I'm like, yeah,
of course.
Yeah,
I'm a therapist.
I'm a therapist. Yeah. I think I should be able to do that. And we tried a lot of different things, and nothing had really worked like long term for success. And then finally I got introduced to this idea of internal family systems, IFS, which if anyone wants to like look that up, if they're like, what is it? He's talking about IFS, just go Google internal family systems and go read. But it's all about this idea of, hey, what about these parts of us that we've been spending time like hating, shaming, running away from, avoiding, battling with? What if we actually like built a relationship with them? And got to hear their story a little bit and gave them the benefit of the doubt a little bit, that they actually don't really want to be doing what they're doing, but they just feel like they have to in order to protect us. And as you get to know these parts, they'll show you how they want to heal. And at first I thought I was like, boring, lame, keep doing what I'm doing, right? And then finally I was like, okay, let me just get curious with this, right? And I remember sitting down with him, and of course I had to pretend like I knew what I was doing, right? And so I was like, all right, just focus on this part of you that wants to view porn. He's like, okay. I'm like, just close your eyes, really focus in on it. And I was like, will you just ask it to tell you about why it feels like it needs to view porn? And then just tell me what it says. And so he's sitting, he's asking it in his head, right? And he just kind of, IFS is really kind of meditative process. You're really mindful, really talking with yourself. And after 20 seconds or so, I'm kind of squirming in my seat, trying to like, okay, what's going to happen here? And he with really somber voice says, this part's telling me that it really wants connection, and it doesn't know how to get connection. And I said, all right, ask it to tell you more. And he said, this part's really showing me like this younger part of me that grew up never feeling good enough for my parents. Like I was always getting beat up by my parents, not physically.
Got it. Yeah.
Always just kind of falling short, not meeting my parents' expectations. And if I was ever like being quote unquote lazy, or if I was ever bored, or if I ever wasn't being productive, then I was failing them. And I just felt really, this part of me just feels really alone. And this part that feels like it needs porn, it just like, this is the only way as like a young 11-year-old, I could finally feel like I was accepted. And I just asked him like, well, how do you feel towards this part of you? He goes, I feel like grateful for it. Not grateful in that I love what it's doing. I want to help. Grateful in that, like, thanks for trying, and I really want to help it heal now. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And he started really like, that was like a turning point for our work. And like I remember him finally, after a few months of doing that type of work, him being like, I haven't viewed in months. Like I haven't even, like, and when I get urges, I know how to process them. Like this is a guy who's like daily, like battling with himself, right?
Yeah.
And
Huge change.
huge change. And he was there was just so much more peace inside of him, right? And I remember one day he looked at me, he's like, who would have thought that this work would have taken us here, man? Like, 6 months ago, we were like trying to count days sober, right? And like, see if we can white knuckle through this together. And it was an honor to go through that process with him.
Dude, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So his life changed dramatically. So from what I'm hearing, we need space and like time and like effort to reflect inward. Are there certain questions? I mean, I love the questions that you asked him.
Yeah.
Is it just being curious about the part that is the triggering aspect of is that the thing, like looking inside and being like, when I have an urge for something, like, what is this part? What does it need? Why does it need that?
It's a super big, that's a really big aspect of it.
Yes.
And so what IFS talks about is every part has a story.
Okay.
Right. And if we could actually just let that part tell us its story, we could finally help it to heal.
That's beautiful. We're trying to get the story of the hurt part of us.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, and there's so you can think of it as, so this client, right? Let's use this client as an example. Yeah. He had a part of him that felt like it needed porn. In IFS, we'd call that a protector. It's protecting. And as he got to know it, he realized there was a part behind that part that was feeling unlovable, unworthy, right? Inadequate. So this pornography part, this part that wanted pornography, was protecting this younger part of him that just felt inadequate, right? And so we want to hear the story of both of those parts. Okay, tell me why and how you learned this is how you protect. And then can we talk to this part that feels unlovable, and can you tell us your story? Tell us about the pain you're feeling. What happens is that person becomes the healing source for their own parts, right? Like, tell me about the pain you're holding, right? I'm here for you, finally, right? Is that making sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think, admitting you have an addiction can be really hard to do. Like the pornography issue.
Yeah.
Like, I know that I had someone that I know that admitted to his wife that he had a pornography issue.
Yeah.
And she freaked out.
Yeah.
Like wanted him to go to sex addiction therapy, like really
right.
Tons of shame around it. And it didn't help at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he wasn't a sex addict.
The disclosure didn't help. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, that disclosing and the reaction from the wife. And I don't blame the wife, because I mean, that is the betrayal of that.
Oh yeah, sure.
But, what I'm learning because I'm talking to so many men now with this podcast and just in my life, like I feel honored, but people are sharing their stories with me. And it's like, the addiction to pornography doesn't mean you're a sex addict.
Right.
I mean, that's to a lot of people, that's a revelation. It's not because you're a pervert and a sex addict. It can lead there, and I'm sure that that is involved with some people, but the general thing is like what you're talking about. There's a part that's the protector of an unhealed part of our life.
Yeah.
And that's how it manifests itself.
Totally. And even if I could take that a little further and say, me personally, I'm not a big fan of the word addict, like porn addict.
Okay.
Right? Like, yeah. I think, and I think this comes down to like this individual, but the clinical idea of an addiction is that we're not able to function anymore.
Okay.
Right? Like, it's really hampering our functioning in a big way. And I think there's a lot of men that I work with that I talk to that, like, they think they're an addict, and it feels really crippling to label themselves as that way.
Well, shame immediately enters.
Enters with that label. And I again asked them to get curious. I'm like, wow, what if we just got curious to the fact that you're actually not addicted? Mm-hmm. This is just a part of you that's protecting you for probably a really good reason, and we could just help it heal. Mm-hmm. We just help it heal. You're not powerless.
Dude, what a cool, gentle approach. I mean, it's just so,
right.
It feels so good.
And it's like empowering, right?
Well, it's building. Instead of like shaming and like something's wrong with you, it's like, let's just fix it. Let's just like, what if you're not?
What if you're not?
Yeah.
What if this part actually just wants you to finally listen to it?
Yeah.
And let it tell its story. And
I mean, that's how Christ would heal and approach. I mean, it was always lifting and building and helping them see how beautiful and how great they are. Satan would love to make you feel terrible.
Would love
and
it.
love to put guilt on your shoulders.
Yes.
And just realizing the source of those feelings, to me, I mean, that's super helpful in my life to know, to realize where fear and guilt and shame come from.
Well, and that's what I tell the clients that that have a spiritual belief,
Yeah.
as well as I say, listen, I want you to just think about this for a moment, right? I want you to picture Jesus, okay? And if someone ran up to Jesus and said, I really want to view porn right now, knowing what you know about Jesus, how would he respond? He wouldn't tell him to go away. He wouldn't tell him you're a sinner. He wouldn't say something's wrong with you. What I believe would happen is Jesus would say, well, you know what? Your best shot at not viewing porn is if you just stay close to me right now. So let me just hold you. And I say, man, that's what we're learning to do with ourselves. When these urges come, you're so used to fighting, you're so used to battling, you're so used to shaming yourself. What if you just held that part of you close and said, hey, I get it. I'm so sorry you feel like this is what you feel like needs to happen right now. But if you're willing to trust me, let's do a better way. Let's go a better way. It's learning to treat yourself, the parts of yourself, with the same love that Jesus treats all of us. That's what I think IFS is.
I love that. I mean, it feels right. It feels beautiful.
Yeah.
It's light filled.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key for men, for men to be close to Christ and Jesus. I mean, that's it. It's like literally be close to them.
Yeah.
How to get close to them? Be close to them.
Yeah.
In your thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you're here. I know we covered a lot. I want to give you the final word on anything else that you think that we left unsaid that could be a nice tie up for our conversation.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think maybe just to maybe just put another hopefully not too fine a point on this, right? But just really emphasize this is I talk a lot about trauma, and sometimes people push back on when like therapists and professionals talk about trauma, because there's this idea of like, well, you're just giving power to trauma, right?
Okay.
Right. Like there's like this mentality, oh, I'm traumatized, therefore I can't do anything about it. Right. And the reason why I try and talk a lot about trauma, and the reason why I love this, is because I actually think the opposite is so true. Right. The more we better understand ourselves and understand where we came from and understand what's happened to us, I actually think it's incredibly empowering. In fact, a key element of trauma healing is looking at the story that trauma has told of your life and then saying, I think I'm ready to write a new story now. And not a story that tries to ignore the trauma and push it away and pretend it didn't happen, but a story that integrates the trauma into my life and says, look at the type of person I'm becoming now, right? I'm not defined by this anymore. In fact, some of the beautiful things that happen is when people who go through trauma then turn around and go do something with their life to help other people, right? That have gone through the same thing. Like, that's so inspiring. I think that's the most encouraging and empowering thing about trauma healing is we're not talking about trauma just to like give you an out, right? To just say, oh, I'm traumatized, it's just the way I am. No. The better you understand yourself, man, the better you can start rewriting your story. And it's really empowering. It's really liberating.
Amen. Thank you so much. This has been very enlightening.
Dude, thanks for having me, man. This has been a blast.
You're awesome. Okay. Thanks, brother.
Yeah.
If you like this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you're looking for more ways to include God throughout your day, check out some of my recent music I created in partnership with Skylight. Link in the description.